Hello all, James here. Now, the next part of the Logan Paul Pikachu Illustrator Pokemon card grift is now in the books, and the card went up for auction a couple of days ago and was bought for just shy of a whopping $16.5 million. Now, described as an, quote, unimaginable holy grail piece, Paul has done a really good job of hyping up this particular collectible through multiple videos and appearances with it dangling around his neck, including in WWE, which is kind of the wrestling tie-in here, as well as Logan Paul being an employee of WWE, independent contractor. Now, the winner of the auction was venture capitalist AJ Scaramucci, of American. He's the son of American financier, former White House communications director, and Kenny Boland's best friend, Anthony Scaramucci, who dropped the eye-watering sum on the piece of printed card with Japanese writing on it. Now, a perfect PSA grading of 10 it received as well, but that's its own contentious point that we'll get to a little later. Now, according to People, and I've got to read this, AJ Scaramucci is on a quest of collecting the uncollectible. He reportedly also hopes to eventually buy a T-Rex dinosaur fossil and the Declaration of Independence on his planetary treasure hunt. Now, if he really wants a T-Rex dinosaur fossil or skull or whatever, well, Vince McMahon does actually have a T-Rex skull somewhere. He used to have it in his office. I suspect he took it with him when he left. So that hunt in particular won't take too long. I'm sure he can just announce, Mr. Scaramucci, that he's after a threesome with at least one other dude and he doesn't want any toilets in the building. So I'm sure Vince will get in touch if he hears that. Now, Logan Paul owned the Pikachu Illustrator card after buying it in July 2021 for what he claimed was some $5.275 million. Now, I say claimed because it was a private sale and we actually can't verify the price he really paid for it, but that is what he claimed. Now, Logan Paul then proudly displayed it around his neck at WrestleMania 38, which I'm sure everybody will remember because that photo has been bandied about a lot as of recent. And then shortly afterwards, he put up the card on a fractional investment website that he found called Liquid Marketplace. Now, I have a video all dedicated to the whole Liquid Marketplace thing as well, but so you can always watch that, go back in the archives a few weeks or whatever it might be. But also, if you want to know more about it, more in depth and more graphics, I guess, as well, hunt out Carl Jobs' video on that as well, because it's far more comprehensive in that sense. But in short, fractional investment was a COVID-era fad where people were invited to buy up fractions of a physical asset, a collectible, a physical collectible, where you would essentially own, in theory anyway, micro shares in the stake of said collectible. If the value of the asset goes up or down, so does your share price, or essentially with Liquid Marketplace, it wasn't a share, it was the value of tokens that you bought that represented shares. Now, all assets were meant to only go live once all of these available tokens in the Pikachu Illustrator case, I think it was 49% or 51%. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all, and there's a reason why it doesn't matter. Anyway, just about half of the Pikachu Illustrator shares or tokens were made available, but then this asset was then only to go live on the marketplace where you can actually trade these tokens representing shares or even sell said asset if it was agreed by the with voting power of the fractional owners whether to sell it down the line. Essentially, none of that could happen, so it was claimed, unless all those tokens were bought up first. Now, here's where the nonsense comes in. And here's what else we discovered recently that further shows that Liquid Marketplace was always one giant pile of crap, and, as the Ontario Securities Commission announced, a fraud. So, this is Logan Paul from February 16th. What an epic night. I'm truly grateful for the Pokemon community, Ken Goldin and my team for making last night a historic moment for the hobby. Now, there's a video I'm not going to show here as well where, confetti drops from the sky. They're watching it live on his YouTube channel, I guess. To address concerns regarding the ownership history of the card, now for the facts. I had originally offered to sell up to 51% of the Illustrator on Liquid Marketplace, so it was 51% he was going to sell. But ultimately, only 5.4% of the card was sold for about $270,000 in the summer of 2022 to fractional owners associated with Liquid Marketplace. Once again, I stress here, and we'll get to the rest of it in a minute, but I stress here that this was only meant to be allowed to have been sold or traded or whatever when all of that 51% that was put up for sale was bought up, and that didn't happen. Now, once again, that's their own marketing material and what they were claiming they said, but once again, according to the small print on the website, you never actually owned anything, never ever owned any of any asset that you were buying tokens for representing shares of said asset. You never owned any of it. It was in the small print. But with all the interviews with Logan Paul and other people who were, owners or officers within this company who had the authority to say, they all said publicly, you will own this, or you will own a fraction of whatever it is. Let's just call it the Pikachu Illustrator card. Now, it's Logan Paul right there who's just admitted that it was only 5.4% of the card's tokens were sold. This means that, once again, the previous promise of allowing an asset to be traded when all tokens were allocated was, of course, total bullshit. And there were also Instagram posts at the time hyping up Liquid Marketplace and the Pikachu Illustrator card, saying, these tokens, these shares are nearly gone. You have to buy them quickly, creating a false sense of buzz around investing in the card, when it turns out that they barely sold 1/20th of the allocated amount of tokens for that asset. Now, which also gives me a sliver of hope for humanity still, that even with all the hype going around, so few people bought into this absolute bollocks. Now, when the Pikachu Illustrator card was then bought back by Logan Paul, at the same price, by the way, as what the tokens were sold for, now that's also another interesting bit, where apparently it's something like 80% of positive votes, or the yay votes, of all the investors that'd be sent out an email, but you had to get like 80% or something before said asset could be sold. But once again, they sent out some phony baloney emails, and it seemed like it was just going to happen, whatever. But another thing is that somewhere, I guess, in the small print, is that the owner of said asset, in this case Logan Paul with the Pikachu Illustrator, could just buy back his stuff at any point and didn't need to ask anyone about it. So that just happened. That was in, once again, May of 2024. I'm going to leave this up because I'm going to start referring to this again in a second. But those token holders, when he did buy back his own card without probably approval of the 80%. Now, the big deal about this was in May 2024 where he bought it, and then very, very soon afterwards, after this money, I guess, went into these people's wallets in Liquid Marketplace, the website was pulled down, and then nobody could withdraw their money. And keep in mind, this is nearly 2 years later at this point. But let's go to it. In May 2024, I bought the card back for the same price it was sold for, per the terms of LM. So there you go. It was actually in the terms and conditions that they snuck in there. And made funds available for users to withdraw. I was told that those funds were available to withdraw for approximately a year after being deposited in LM users' accounts. And many of the fractional owners did indeed withdraw those funds during that time. For reasons outside of my control, because it was coming up with security commissions. The LM site then went offline. Now, this also needs to be said. It went offline within, a couple of weeks after he bought the card back. So it kind of strikes me as one of the co-founders of the website, he probably knew that the Ontario Securities Commission was looking into them and thought it was best to buy back now. So once again, I personally paid to get the site back up. Users are now able to withdraw their funds, and they have been at liquidmarketplace.io. They were also notified via email. And then some self-congratulatory kind of nonsense. May the next Pokemon journey be just as happy as the last. But if you go to the customer portal here, it does actually exist. It's .io, by the way, which is very, very interesting, of course, because .io is British Indian Ocean Territory, which I figure is some sort of tax haven or whatever it is that a load of these websites all seem to operate on, with few regulations, if any. I know quite a lot of websites that deal with money actually use the .io thing, but once again, I'm not an expert in this kind of thing, so I merely have to speculate on that one. But there's something else I need to also make sure, that the website was shut down in June of 2024, I think, merely a couple of weeks after the Pikachu Illustrator was bought back. And several of the people who were involved with the website, including founding it and other officers, are now under investigation at this point. Logan Paul is not, though, because once again, it's the Ontario it's the Ontario Securities Commission, and he's not Canadian, so I don't know if anything can happen with that. But once again, back to the Twitter. At least there is a microscopic bit of good news at this point, that some people will be able to get their money back if they weren't able to prior. So we also need to talk about Logan Paul's earnings on this. He actually made $8 million or so profit after auction fees. Now, that's obviously before tax, of course, but the fractional investors made absolutely nothing. At least once again, they got some money, or got their investment back after nearly 2 years of being unable to. Now, all we have to do is wait and see if Logan Paul will fully reimburse all the CryptoZoo victims who put money into that nonsense and then never even got to play a game that was promised but never ever delivered, even if it was ever made. Now, the final thing to mention here, as I said at the beginning, was the PSA 10 grading of the Pikachu Illustrator card. Now, the PSA is the Professional Sports Authenticator Group, who grades collectibles from 0 to 10. I guess they grade stuff for 0 if it's just a pile of ash or something, depending on how well preserved said item is. Now, the PSA and other grading companies are kind of ridiculous for a number of reasons, and I'll give you a couple of them. One is, and the major one is, inconsistent grading, right? Cards with nearly identical condition can receive wildly different grades, and the reason is it's human subjectivity, human error. It has to have a person actually check the damn thing. It can't really, well, I'm sure AI will take over, our AI overlords will take over that as they are doing everything else, but you can also send in the same item multiple times and get multiple different grades for the exact same item. So once again, it's human subjectivity that's grading these things. And then you can do that again and again until you receive a grade that you actually want. Now, then because certain people send the same item in again and again and again, it actually affects the perceived rarity of said item, and therefore it will affect the market price. So if you keep sending in the same stuff and other people are sending in the exact same not the exact same physical item, but the same, you've got two of the same card or whatever, then it will seem like, oh, well, they sent it in 5 times each. Well, it's not as rare as we thought it was. So there's also the issue of counterfeit items, trimmed cards like collectible baseball cards and stuff, the Honus Wagner, for example, that's a famous one, and otherwise altered originals that somehow slipped through the cracks, once again due to human error. Now, there's also high grading fees as well, because costs increase with declared value and service level. So essentially, if something's worth 10 grand with whatever grade it is, then PSA will take whatever percentage. But if it's worth 100 grand with a better grading, PSA takes the same, I guess, percentage of it, or at the very least they charge more. So it's in their interests, or they're incentivized to grade stuff higher, because then their commission is higher as well. But then specifically, we've got to talk about the Logan Paul card. Now, this has been subject to scrutiny since he bought it from another collector, and there are other collectors out there who are like experts in Pokemon cards who believe that the Pikachu Illustrator that he has specifically is not a PSA 10. I'm going to read this from Polygon. Some critics online are circulating the claim that Paul's card is not a PSA 10, or that he had a PSA 8 or 9 regraded to a 10 somehow. In April 2022, Poker Beach claimed that the card has gone through multiple owners over the years and was graded as a PSA 9 several times due to a small chip in the corner. Far more recently, other content creators have made similar claims, referencing the chip and how the card is off-center. So there you go. I mean, there's no actual super proof there. I mean, it has been graded PSA 10, but you don't know. Who knows what has happened, if it really was an 8 or a 9, and then all of a sudden, lo and behold, it's been graded a 10. I don't know, but it's just as a thought to close out this video. The rich get richer. The rest of us have to sit here, we're stuck with our worthless Kabutos and Weedles and maybe even the occasional Charmeleon in our collections and all the other crap Pokemon cards that we've got sitting, going mouldy in our lofts because we gave up on the hobby nearly 30 years ago at this point. So there you go. And also we've got a load of energy cards and trainer cards that, once again, no one ever traded because no one could actually figure out how to really play the card game itself because it's unbelievably complicated. But anyway, that is the sort of moral of the story. And there you go. Logan Paul is now some $8 million richer before tax than he was a few days earlier. So like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you for the next video.